But I think I was reading something one day, and it just clicked that if you really want to be small is beautiful, but scale is important. And if you really want to shoot for scale, you've got to obsess about whatever it is you do morning, afternoon, and night.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Eye of Africa. I am your host, Aina Fadina. Today we are talking to Kola Aina, who is an entrepreneur, investor, collector, and a venture capital ecosystem builder. Kola is a founding partner of Ventures Platform, a Pan-African venture capital firm that is focused on empowering young entrepreneurs in Africa through the means of technology. Kola, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. When I tell people that I'm interviewing Kola Aina, they're like, are you guys related? I'm like, no. Aina is my first name. Aina is his last name. So we're not related. We just have, similar we have the same name first and last.
Yeah, it was really fascinating when we first met. I hadn't met anyone that had that as their first name.
Yeah.
So it's such a delight to do an Aina interview.
Probably the only time you probably have this one.
To first, for sure. Yeah.
So Kola, you've had a very impressive background as an entrepreneur, and then you are someone who truly believes in building the VC ecosystem on the continent. Can you share a little bit about what was that moment that you realized, like, this is what I want to do?
Wow, it's an interesting story. So I started off at a very early age, growing up at home, feeling like I was in what I now would call a startup foundry. My parents were always building businesses. My mom would travel the world to Asia, Hong Kong back in the day. She would trade in all types of fast-moving items. She had like a 9-to-5, but she always had like businesses on the side. My dad, on his part, he initially started off as a salesman. He worked in the brewery industry and ventured out up north to Kano state in the northern part of Nigeria. And then I think after a couple of years working in corporate, he started building businesses. Everything from running probably one of the largest dairies in the region at the time, to being in finance, running a finance business, which is actually quite similar to what I do now, providing loans to small businesses. At some point, we had he had a manufacturing business that did plastics and packaging, and probably his most significant venture was a publishing business that really grew tremendously while we were growing up. In all of this, I always sort of experienced this bustling environment at home where these businesses literally would start from the dining table in our home, and I was privy to lots of the founding conversations, and so I think that was really my entry into entrepreneurship. On the back of that, obviously, every time I had an opportunity to sell something, I would find a way to make it a business. So from dubbing tapes on my friends and selling mixtapes to when I went to uni, I picked up graphic design, and I sort of became the de facto graphic designer. I also had a little promotions business on the side. So always sort of tried my hand at entrepreneurship. Fast forward, I got out of business school, worked in corporate finance for a while. After that, I moved back to Nigeria, and I'm abbreviating a lot here, and worked on my family business for a while. And then I decided to sort of strike out on my own. which was a really sort of bold move to make at the time, being, in my culture, the first child. There's a certain level of responsibility and to some extent pressure that you feel. But I took that decision because I felt very convinced that I kind of wanted to dance to the tune of my own music in a way. And that sort of led me on a path of self-discovery where I was really keen to understand, both from a spiritual and a functional standpoint, what the purpose of my life was. And so that really is the beginning of the story of my sort of my current career. Because I spent a couple of months in wilderness, as they would say. I was really searching for meaning and purpose, and I read several books during that time and trying to sort of understand how a young man can organize their life. I'd always been a very mission-driven person, so I'd always felt that everything you do has to sort of compound and lead to some direction. And it was in that space that I figured that the purpose of my life was to sort of build platforms to enable people, businesses. Now that's a really profound discovery for a 20, I think I must have been 23 at the time. I think that's a really profound discovery for a 23-year-old. I don't know if I can repeat it now if I went back in time, but that set me on the path of really thinking about how I could build platforms. And obviously so that led me to technology as the platform of choice. And so I practiced I built my co-founder and I founded our technology business, and I ran that business for about a decade, and I started angel investing from that. And that kind of led me to becoming a full-time venture capitalist. So it's been a very sort of organic journey of being a serial entrepreneur, doing multiple things, to sort of narrowing into a thesis-based sort of entrepreneurial journey, and evolving while working in corporate, which I think is very important for young people as you think about building a career to gain some experience, to now evolving into becoming a full-time venture capitalist. And so I come to VC as an operator, someone that has as an operator, as a founder, having gone through this journey that I've been through.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is there's a sense of you're very lucky to have found your passion quite early, and your passion was able to sort of fit into a place where it kind of matched your purpose. For a lot of people, that is something that they just finding that passion to connect to your purpose, but it's just something that's so challenging. So it's a hard question for me to ask, but it's at what point did you be like, this is the intersection of the worlds and this is my purpose?
Yeah, you can draw a really interesting Venn diagram to describe what you just described. But for me, when you get there, the way I describe it is you feel like you would do what you do for free, and some people describe it as being able to go for hours and not feel like they've missed the meal. And to be honest, that's sort of I'm very blessed to feel that way about and what it does enable, I think, is the ability to play the long game, or what has been described as infinite games, right? Now, the passion side of things is I was then also very curious about what are the things I naturally enjoy, and I knew I enjoyed creating things, I enjoyed designing things, and I enjoyed selling things. So in other words, when I would create something, I enjoyed getting other people to buy into it or subscribe to it. And so those three things, creating, designing, and selling things, were my sort of key interests And so for me, it was about figuring out how those things could fuse with what I had now come to discover was the purpose of my life. And obviously that led me to, my first my first successful business, emerging platforms, which then led me to Ventures Platform, which is sort of what I do now.
What does it mean to dream? What does it mean to build? And what does it mean to back?
Wow. What does it mean to dream, build, and back? Look, I think, the best way I'll describe that, the dreaming part, for instance, is in January this year, we hosted our first physical founders retreats in a lovely location in Lagos called the Lakaway Lakes, a golf resort just outside Lagos City. We had, over 50 founders from across the continent, from Senegal, from South Africa, from Kenya, spend 4 days together, 3 days together, exchanging notes on building businesses that are impacting lives on the continent. And for me, it was such an emotional experience because, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, probably to be precise, when actually, my dates are wrong now, 2016. That's 7 years.
7.
Yeah. 7 years ago when I founded Ventures Platform, I literally had a very vivid dream of that retreat because I was very convinced that we were going to build a venture investing platform that focused on community and that focused on shared learning and that was Pan-African. And to see that sort of materialize 7 years later was really emotional for me. And so I think being able to dream of the things you want to achieve and document those things down and walk toward and build. Now that's where the build part comes in, right? And gain sort of the requisite skills, the organizing capabilities to pull people and resources together. And I think the last thing you said was scale, right?
To back.
And obviously, to now be able to sort of use all of those resources to back other people, I think is a life worth living. Now, when I moved to Nigeria in 2009, and I wanted to start emerging platforms. We tried to raise venture at that time. Obviously, there was no luck. It was all cricket sounds. We then tried to raise debt, and because we weren't looking to launch an oil and gas business or a real estate business, no one would give us that money. Obviously, when our first sort of big account took off, and we had this sort of revenue share model where the banks started seeing the transactions, and then they started coming to want to sort of partner. And that was an interesting experience for me because I never forgot, and so when I was able to, I was very keen to back other people. I ensured they didn't have that same sort of experience. Now, obviously, as we say very jokingly, that Lagos is not San Francisco. The classic VC or angel model requires that you trust, because you literally meet someone, you spend a couple hours, couple days in aggregate with them, and you buy into their vision and you back them with your money, your access. But a lot of the outcomes of that sort of exchange are dependent on the founder. It's been, 100 companies later, it's been I would do what I do again. I'll do it again.
So VC is a relatively new asset class, extremely risky asset class as well. And I think some of the things I go back and forth with around sort of like VC in Africa is that we're modeling venture capital in the West through an African perspective with Western metrics of success. How are you able to sort of decipher the existence of those two worlds as you kind of build Ventures Platform?
Yeah, look, I think what I hear you say is are we sort of localizing
Yeah.
this this tool in a way that it would deliver the outcomes that we require on the continent? And if that's what you're asking, I think, look, I think we're doing some of that, but there's a lot more that we have to do. Look, when we started, when I started investing in 2014, Venture Platform was formed in 2016. There wasn't many of us actually investing. There wasn't many people. I mean, you had the private equity guys playing, and that frustration and that sense of loneliness kind of led me to when I gave my TED talk in 2017 or 2018. The question I was really asking was, who own our future borns? Fast forward, obviously, and the point then was, I knew that we would build, that this asset class would produce companies at scale and companies with impact. But my worry was those companies would not be owned by people that look like us, or people who are from the region. Fast forward, our latest fund, we announced the first close of it. I want to say my data all jumbled up now. In December of 2021. And the first close was over 60% local capital.
Oh, wow. Local as in African or Nigeria?
African and probably mostly African, and in fact, mostly Nigeria.
Oh, wow.
And so, in my own little prism of experience, you can see how that transition, and, in my mind, what has enabled that sort of a few things. One, the markers of success that we've shown over the period. In 2014, if you were telling folks to invest in venture, you had no success stories to point. But obviously, thankful to the Paystack exit, for instance, one of my early investments, we now had that to point to as you had cases of secondary liquidity experiences locally, and so I think, in answering the question you asked, I think one of the first things that needs to happen is local capital needs to play a more prominent role in funding these innovations, because when that happens, when the outcomes happen, some of the capital stays in country, right, and the impact of it is exponential. I think the second thing that I would touch on is really the point around capital having context. What is important for development here? What do we need to build now? What needs to be funded now? What policy? How can we get policy aligned to support this company?
Yeah.
Who are on the boards of these companies as they scale? How connected are they locally?
Yeah.
And so that context is really critical. Because venture capital is a powerful developmental asset class, right? I mean, when I met Shola in 2016, so
Who's Shola?
Shola is the founder of Paystack, probably one of the most successful companies that are acquired by Stripe.
Now he's a Unilag grad. Is he the one that went?
He went to Babcock.
Babcock
University.
Okay. Wow, in Nigeria.
Wow. Yeah. Portfolio companies actually range from. I mean, there's a large chunk that are locally educated. So I know people talk about the foreign educated being more funded. That's not been the case in our experience, to be very honest. I think you see more of that in East Africa than West Africa, especially because we're looking at companies from a Pan-African standpoint. But
we met Shola.
Yeah, so at that time you couldn't pay for a ticket online. I mean, it was a struggle. Fast forward today, companies like Paystack and Flutterwave supports somewhere in the region of 500,000 merchants that now have the ability to expand sort of their customer base, generate more revenue, and do all sorts of things. And so, the economic impact of that, let's not even talk about the taxes these companies can pay and the jobs they create, is that these innovations expand access and really help to build the new industries. And so I think capital allocators in the region that are investing in other asset classes that are interested in development must come to realize that this is a powerful tool to achieve that.
And it's also a pipeline as well too. You think about like VC to private equity to all the different some major infrastructural solutions that the continent needs. And they both have a play, the VC and the PE component of things. What role do each of them play in the development of the continent as a whole?
Yeah, look, I think both play very critical roles. Yeah, PE in the region has tended to look at more traditional industries, but from an M&A perspective, there's a lot we can learn from the PE guys and the PE teams in the region. I think another thing that I think is really will be catalytic, and we've been working on this for a while. We started a collaboration with ARM, one of the larger asset managers in the region, doing an incubator at the time, which has now sort of evolved into a partnership with Techstars. And the idea there is that if you don't get your corporates involved in investing to start with, and so hopefully grow that to M&A activity, you don't really sort of deepen the ecosystem for people, because without M&A, you're not going to see market expansion. You're not going to see more interest in the ecosystem. So that's sort of a good trend that we're starting to see expand in the region. The sovereign wealth funds are also getting in the fray. The Nigerian sovereign wealth fund, for instance, is a great example. Actually, one of our LPs, and actively looking at other funds at the moment. So look, I think there's a lot that we still have to do. I must mention that the NGX, the stock exchange, just recently launched a technology board to look at how we can create more room for the startups that we fund to raise capital locally in our capital markets. I happen to serve on that board, and that's the sort of focus that we're going to be looking at over the next several months. So I think we're not there yet, but there are markers of success. I think 10 years from now, I think our ecosystem is going to look very different from the American ecosystem. If anything at all, I think we're learning the hard way now, because in 2022, 2021, you had massive inflow of what some will call tourist capital, but we're now starting to see a retreat.
Yeah.
But thankfully, we've built some local capacity to fund these companies and ourselves. Obviously, with more progress to come.
Yeah. So, Kola, why Africa? Why now? And then can you just help us paint sort of local context as to what it looks like on the ground?
Sure.
And then as you're navigating this business, this sort of space, the regulatory and policies and things like that are being put in place locally on the ground as well would be helpful for context.
Great. Look, I think it goes without saying, the stats point to it, that one of the only regions in the world today where the high risk, high reward mantra holds true remains the continent. It's important that we recognize that there is risk, but the return potential is probably one of the greatest untapped opportunities that remains in the world today. And that's because there's so much that still needs to be built. But you also have the right demographic sort of dynamic. One of the fastest growing populations at the moment, very youthful. Nigeria's population today, I know this is often overflogged, is probably somewhere in the region of 200 and 250 million, and we're forecasted to hit double that by 2050. What's super interesting is that more than 60% of that population is below the age of 30, right? That population is very savvy, is mostly a large segment of that population is familiar with the internet, speaks English, and clearly, as you know, you see in everything from Nollywood to our music, to our films, to what we do, what our young people can do when they are presented with opportunities in tech and design, or when they even move to, Western countries. It's very obvious that it's an industrious, youthful population. Yeah, so the Africa story remains a very compelling one, and you see that story in Nigeria, in Egypt, across Eastern Africa, in the Francophone region. I think what is really needed is a particular kind of capital, and the way I like to put it is you need capital that has empathy, that's patient, and that has context. Now, patience in the sense that, look, what in my mind, and this sort of leads to the thesis of our fund, we believe that market creating innovations are the kinds of innovations we need to fund the most in the region. In other words, how do you innovate around delivering a product or service in a manner that opens up a new market segment or creates access for a new population to a market, whether it be people or businesses, not necessarily a sustaining innovation that merely improves the experience for a good or service. The challenge here is that people are simply not able to consume education, they're not able to consume healthcare. And so you're literally they're not able to consume insurance. So you're able to introduce new these populations to goods and services that they simply go without today, but they require, right? But the challenge with market creating innovations is you sometimes have to backward integrate significantly, right? Because you don't necessarily have all the other sort of enablers that you require. The infrastructure doesn't quite exist. You're not going to leapfrog all of that infrastructure as people often think. And so what that means is the sort of build phases of these businesses can tend to be longer, and the return profile can tend to be longer. And so the capital, the return expectation on capital has to sort of match that horizon as well. Unfortunately, the traditional venture capital model of 10-year funds, we may be plus 2 years or whatever, I don't think is the right fit for that. There are several conversations about evergreen fund structures that may be a better fit. But again, for now, we work with the capital that we have to support these businesses. Now, on the part of empathy, I think it is really important that we support more local fund managers who live in these markets, understand the challenges, have probably experienced the challenges themselves, and this is not to sort of negate the role or the place of global investors investing in the region. We think that's great, and we're very happy to co-invest with several global investors. But I think you've got to figure out the role of the local fund manager. who are able to sort of navigate and have context. Again, back to the point around context.
And I think there's just all these unrealistic expectations where everyone thinks we all know what we're doing in venture, but ultimately speaking, a lot of people are first-time fund managers. They haven't seen the sort of the cycle of VC.
Absolutely.
So this reset had to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a baptism of fire for many folks. Again, as you know, the Paystack exits really attracted lots of new money, even local money, into the ecosystem. Some of that has sort of calmed a little bit, and being an angel investor is not as sexy at the moment. But I think what you're seeing is that the true believers would remain consistent. There's incredible talent out there. There's incredible. There's we're seeing the rise of what we call talent recycling, where folks that work in later stage startups that have raised venture, are learning on the ropes and are going on to start their own startups. And really, we're very attracted to founders that have the domain expertise and experience under their belt.
So Ventures Platform,
Yep.
Who are you guys? What is your ethos? And what is your X factor?
Well, great question. So, the way I like to describe it is we are a early stage discovery fund that's thesis driven. Our thesis is to find, partner with, and support market creating innovations. A market creating innovation is a particular kind of innovation that looks to target non-consumption. Again, non-consumption is the inability of people or businesses to access a good and service that they need. And so the whole idea for us is to seek out folks that are using technology and innovative business models to create new markets, to provide access, which invariably means that we are focused on sort of companies focused on mass markets, generally lower income but high volume communities. And so that's sort of the common thread of the kind of company that we tend to partner with. We're a day one investor, so we're investing from the pre-seed stage, all the way from ideation. We prefer to see an MVP, and we're able to sort of underwrite companies that perform and partner with them all the way to Series A. So we do follow-on rounds in some of our best performing companies. Our mandate is a Pan-African mandate. We're interested in supporting companies across the region, and we have a portfolio that's so well represented across the continent. We love to work with founders that we can consider partners. And we generally consider it a privilege to actually have an opportunity to partner very early, because it's all about the founder. The founders build the businesses. Our role is to sort of act as a catalyst and to be sort of fuel on what I like to call an already burning fire, right? So it's really important that fire does exist. And then the question we tend to ask ourselves is, how can we add value here?
So when you think about the metrics of your decision-making process on founders, what are the top three? Because it could be total addressable market, it could be the founder, are they coachable, are they the industry expert?
Or is it from you guys have the expertise to really empower the people given so what are the sort of what you guys?
So the first and probably the most important thing for us is the founding team. Again, and this is because we're such an early stage investor that oftentimes at the time we're investing, there's not much else to look at. And so we're interested, I ask myself a question: would I work for this founder? Would I be willing to open my Rolodesk for this founder? We also spend time looking at the dynamic within the founding team. Are they complementary? We used to have on our website that we won't back jerks, for instance, right? So again, the quality of the human, I think, is really important to us. Because we'll spend a lot of time with the founding teams often, either in person or on Zoom, over email, and so big emphasis on the quality of the people building the business. Obviously, because we have to deliver venture scale returns, and we're not necessarily an impact fund, we have a hurdle rate and return expectations. TAM is really important. Is this business providing a solution in a big enough market? And what's the trend of that market? Is it trending up or trending down? Are there enablers, the needed enablers? Again, given the kind of capital that we have, it does help if there are if you have the enablers. I mean, we're very happy for our businesses to backwardly integrate where it's efficient.
Yeah.
But it does help if you have existing enablers already. So definitely team, market, size of market, and again, I guess the third bucket for us would be sort of the availability of all of the resources that are required. So whether it is the sort of enablers, whether it's the regulatory environment, and the ability for us as a team to add value. Is this a space we understand and we can add value in? Yeah.
So do you have any advice for aspiring founders?
Yeah, sure. I think one is it's important that you have a really clear why. I think at a point within the African context in 2020, 2021, it got really cool to be a founder. Everyone was starting a company, and what you find is when you dug a little deeper, it was very fluffy,
Yeah.
right? But it's a very hard thing to do, to build. It's actually, people say bootstrapping is difficult, but I look, if you're gonna do it right, and if you're not gonna sort of play funny games, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Because for one, there's the return expectation, there's the reporting obligations. So you want to ensure that you are, as you set out, you are pursuing an idea that you want, are truly committed to, are willing to sort of toil night and day to execute. Because there are easier ways to if you're smart, there are easier ways to make a living.
Yeah.
So have a really clear why, and that can take some time. Especially in this climate. I think, look, for existing founders, this is not the time for frivolous activities. This is the time to sort of buckle down, and focus on sort of near-term profitability, focus on extending your runway for sort of as long as you can without sort of breaking the back of the business. No one knows, how long this sort of lull that we're currently experiencing will last for, and so it's the best thing you can do is put your business in a position where you're not desperate for the next round of capital.
Because you guys are now a typical founders, 18 to 24 months of runway possible.
That is the advice that we are giving our portfolio companies. You want to ensure you've got 18 to 24 months on deck, and you also want to ensure that if you're not sort of if you don't have positive gross profits, you're heading towards that in the near term. So yeah.
I talked to some founders. They're like, what's your burn rate? They're like, what is that? I'm like,
It is incredible, some of the stuff that folks are not paying attention to, right? But those the high flying days of 2021 and even 2022, I think a thing of the past. We still believe that companies with solid unit economics and great business models are going to be able to raise capital, but the traction expectations are significantly higher now. We're still actively investing, even though some of our colleagues have completely self-dialed down But obviously, the bar is a lot higher today than it was across the industry a few months ago.
There are not that many of us that sort of play in this world of like creativity and VC and investing, and we're able to bring these tools together. But I've spoken to a number of creatives that you have, I don't like the term empowered, but that you, I don't like the term
Partner with,
exactly, that you partner with. And the one thing the consistent thing was your appreciation for not just their work, like the final product, but their process. And not a lot of people who are finance people appreciate just the grind of that a lot of artists go through. And I call it sort of the point of culture, commerce, and influence. How do those three worlds kind of come together? And then, as a society, they're the ones who are defining and shifting who we are, how we exist. The narrative, right? Why is that so important for you to be a catalyst for that art ecosystem?
Correct. Yeah. Again, I think it sort of dials back to this notion of being a platform for me. As I got to understand what being a platform meant over the years, I started to realize that this platform could enable multiple things. We could improve educational outcomes using technology and capital, but we could also improve how we are perceived globally through our film. Not only about the stories we tell through film, but the level of excellence through which we tell those stories. We want to be proud of not only the volume of movies we produce, but the quality of the movies, right? The arts for me, is really my way of sort of helping to preserve history and document history. I mean, there's lots of talk about the fact that as Africans we haven't necessarily documented our heritage as much, and so I think as collectors, we are deliberate about documenting and institutionalizing our collections. We are doing that. We're doing what wasn't done, helping to sort of preserve these stories that artists tell through their works, and the messages they're trying to pass across. I really appreciate getting to sort of know the artists personally and build a relationship with them, because I'm very interested in the motivation and the message the artist is looking to portray through their work, less from the standpoint of thinking about it as a beauty of objects, to really trying to understand what influences the person, because I think that helps to sort of deepen the appreciation for the work, and then you start to consider it a privilege to actually be a preserver of that work in the manner that you collect it. And so for me, it's a very nuanced experience. I also, prefer to collect deep as opposed to broad. I started collecting broadly and working, and as you do when you're in your early days of fascination with any topic, you kind of go berserk. But now I focus on collecting deep, working with a few artists, and just following them through their careers. For me, there's also an education component, and I think public art does this really well, in the sense that when a society can appreciate works that are in public spaces, I think it sort of recalibrates how you place value on things. So whether it's value for life, or value for contemplation, and so which is why I was very fascinated when Lagos State started to sort of invest in public art installations, even though that kind of sort of slowed and became political. But yeah, it's something that I find to be a very powerful way to sort of mold how society forms. And so, a couple of years ago, I had a great opportunity to collaborate with Victor Ikemana in one of his first public installations in Nigeria, one of our campuses in Abuja, and those containerized works have made such a significant impact on thousands of people since then. And people talk about it and sort of make posts about it and the various interpretations that they take away from it. But there's also been opportunities at the Yemisi Shillong Museum where I've sort of chaired the advisory board over the last few years to utilize the arts to teach young people that come from probably less privileged backgrounds about various subjects, but through the arts. So whether it's teaching about materials, copper, metal, through works of sculpture, or whether it's teaching about trade, or religion, through works of art. And so you're able to achieve multiple things as you do that. I find that to be such an important thing for us to do as a people, and I'm really glad that I get a chance to do that.
And you also have Tate the Knowledge and Insights, working with the British Tate Museum as well, as they sort of, I guess, collect all these artists as well. Can you just speak about that, just a tidbit?
Working with the Tate Acquisition Committee, I think is a great opportunity to work with other members to improve representation in the Tate's collection. We are very much, I am very much focused on ensuring that there's more contemporary artists from Africa and the diaspora that are represented in the Tate's collection. The Tate has probably one of the most important collections in England, and so it's a privilege to be a part of that group, to further that work as a part of this sort of global movement to ensure that we are represented as it should be.
And from an investment perspective, I always say VC is quite similar, like early stage VC to the art world, but the art world just gets no love at all.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think if you're doing it right,
or like a film fund, like
yeah.
do we start a film? Like, how do you put a number on a?
Yeah, look, I think if you're doing it right,
Yeah.
Whether it's art, whether it's film, whether it's watches, whether it's music,
Yeah.
all of these things are assets, right? And I have friends who are, working on art funds, film funds. I've had the privilege to partner with a number of films and invest as well. And so I think as these asset classes and these ecosystems continue to mature, you would see more and more of these investing platforms to support them. I'm good friends with the folks at ArtSplit, for instance, who are looking to democratize access to art collecting and investing in the region, and various other platforms that are doing very interesting things in those ecosystems.
Do you use the same lens? Do you use the same lens, or in terms of when you invested in sort of creative projects, or?
Yeah, so with to some extent. So with the art, for instance, I'm very interested in emerging artists, which younger artists, which is not too dissimilar from pre-seed companies. With film, less so. With film, I prefer to sort of invest in projects that have great teams, and I'm not sure why I guess with film's just really difficult, can be difficult, right? And so you don't want too much trial and error. So I would say with art, yes, I have done quite a bit of that, work with some artists from the early days till maturity, and I also like to sort of partner and collect works from the masters and whatnot where I can. But yes, I think more so with art, less with film.
Yeah. And congrats on Gangs of Lagos.
Thank you.
That
thank
was
you.
hectic.
Yeah,
That was a
it's-
phenomenal movie.
Yeah, really proud of how that's played out. I think it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Really proud of the production qualities and you know, look, it is a difficult conversation that the film puts forward, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be had.
I was gonna say, are there any weaknesses? But I'm gonna say, are there any opportunities?
Yeah.
And areas of growth where you see who you are as a person, or how you could have engaged with the world?
So yeah, look, the one thing that, you know, I've kind of been public about is just this sort of memory challenge that I have. You know, I hate to call it a disability, but I had an early an experience in my younger days that sort of led to my memory being sort of not top-notch and impaired to an extent, and I kind of struggled with it for many years. But you know, there are two outcomes that came out of that for me. One is it's enabled me to be able to have very low loss aversion. So in other words, I'm able to sort of move on from a loss, from a failure, quicker than most. And so in my mind, you know, it's important to have an ability to convert what is meant to be a demerit to a strength, you know. I think the second is really just learned to develop various mechanisms to work around that. So I'm an obsessive writer, note taker, and whatnot. And you know, over the years, I mean, I'm not the best at remembering names and numbers off the top of my head, but definitely built various coping mechanisms to charge to all of that sort of what would have been a disability for me, especially given the work that I do. I think the other thing to sort of note as something I learned very early in my career is the critical importance of focus. So in the early days before emerging platforms, in fact, emerging platforms was one of about 5 businesses I was trying to run at that time, you know, and I'd gotten into this whole idea of having multiple streams of income and trying to do many things. But you know, I think I was reading something one day and it just clicked that if you really want to be small is beautiful, but scale is important. And if you really want to shoot for scale, you've got to obsess about whatever it is you do morning, afternoon, and night. You know, and you're not going to achieve anything of significance if it's just one of many things that you do. And so my mantra sort of became moved from being from multiple streams of income to the disciplined pursuit of less. You know, and how that can really sharpen your focus and just improve your execution. And that realization, I would have to say, was sort of the inflection point for me. I literally, and I can be very obsessive when I make a decision, I literally went and unwound all of those businesses and just hyper-focused on one thing. And obviously, many years later, it sort of, you know, the positive outcomes started to materialize. But obviously that was several years of grit and focus and just pounding the pavement. But I think if I hadn't focused, none of that would have happened. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is wonderful.
This is very good.
Thank you. And yeah, you know, I wanted to make sure it was a conversation that, you know, my mom could listen to. It's like, what is VC? And she watches Shark Tank. I'm like, no. Or that my dad, who actually understands finance. My mom, she worked at National Theatre when I was growing up. She used to commission the movies there. Something that my nephews, my nieces, and just, you know, your daughter, like just people can watch and be like, oh, I can see myself in this person past, future, or present. It's hard to kind of tap into all the elements of someone's life.
Well, I hope it's relatable. It's been an interesting conversation. We've covered so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us on today's episode of Eye of Africa. I am your host, Aina Fadina. And special thanks to Kola Aina. Truly appreciate your words, your insights, and the gems that you shared on finding your purpose and your focus as well too. And until the next one, take care.